What's up, guys? As promised in my original video, I was going to make a long-term review, and I've been procrastinating on this video, frankly, because I've been wanting to give it a little bit more time so that I can give my final thoughts on the Garmin 47 dash cam in combination with the OBDII port power adapter. Just so that I can be transparent with you guys about what my thoughts were as a long-term user. So I've had this set up for roughly a year now. And I should mention, as I did in my previous video, this is completely unsponsored. I bought this with my own money. The original video, which I'm incredibly flattered by, I'm up to 24,000 views on that video. I'm quite shocked. My first dash cam video that I made several years ago, which was a cheaper Amazon camera, didn't do quite as well. But hopefully you guys will appreciate this follow-up video as a little bit over a 1-year review of my thoughts of the camera and if I would still recommend it. So let's go over to the bench and then I'll get started. All right, guys, so like I said, I wanted to wait a full year before I made this review, and honestly went a little bit over that. But if you are simply just wanting what my response is of whether or not I would still buy this a year later, the short answer is absolutely. This has been a really great setup. I've taken it on several road trips now. I've commuted with the car now, and this setup is phenomenal. I like the fact that I didn't have to splice any of the wires in the harness. I didn't have to use a USB adapter for the power. It creates a very OEM look to the interior of the car, as you could see in the original video. There's no wires or anything outside of the little bit of wire that's behind the rearview mirror, but it's tucked in nicely to where it doesn't really obstruct your view, and frankly after a while you lose sight of it. So overall, highly recommend this setup. Now with that being said, if you want to keep watching the video, what I'm going to do is go through some of the things that I haven't been quite fond of, and I'll explain that a little bit further. So with that being said, the Garmin 47 as a whole is a phenomenal camera. The resolution on it is supreme. When you download the videos to your phone, everything is very crisp, and that's for day and night footage. I've been quite impressed with it. The night footage isn't quite as good as some of your more expensive dash cameras, which should be expected. The more expensive typically have better processors and sensors, but overall, for the price point that this camera was at when I purchased it a year ago, which was around about 150 bucks, I think the price has dropped now. That was a phenomenal bargain. And at the time, I think I paid around $40 for this adapter. And as I mentioned in the original video, the whole reason I bought this adapter was for the fact that I had just purchased a brand new vehicle and I did not want to splice into the harness. I know several people had said, you know, you can get a cheaper alternative, you can do the out of fuse route, you can, you know, splice into the cigarette lighter, things like that. But I really tried to make it very clear I did not want to do that and risk voiding my warranty. And so if you're in that same situation as me, this OBDII port adapter is phenomenal. Now, I will say, if you leave your car sitting for a while, this adapter does shut off, and it has different increments on it, which is something you want. It has the ability to shut off automatically so that it doesn't drain your battery to the point where you cannot start your car. So unlike having a hardwired system where you have to think about it, or put a separate switch or something like that, or make sure that it's on switched power or keyed power, this does that for you, so you don't have to worry about that. One complaint I have about this setup is if you do not drive the vehicle for a long period of time, you say about a week or more, the camera will actually die. And unfortunately, when it dies, it does take a while to reboot. I've noticed sometimes that the automatic kick-on feature, which is from the OBDII adapter, doesn't always work. And so what I mean by that is once the camera has reached a certain level, the camera will actually not kick back on unless you hit the button to turn it on or unplug the adapter and plug it back in. It's a minor gripe overall, but I just wanted to point that out. That is one thing that I have noticed as a user of this camera. But overall, the simplistic answer is yes, I would still recommend the camera. I think it's a great entry-level camera for dash cams, and frankly for dash cams, you're not really looking for cinema footage. You may want 4K for the clarity and things like that, but you're not shooting an actual feature film. You're really using it in the event of an accident, or something like that, so you can prove what happened during the accident. That's ultimately, we have to remember what the purpose of these cameras are for. And so I think sometimes when people review them, they may get a little too critical of some of the things. With that being said, there's a ton of features that this camera packs, and I'll be completely honest, I've shut almost all of those off. And so that's something that drives the cost of these cameras up as well. These manufacturers add in a lot of features, and some people may use it, some people may not. The voice feature I don't have any use for, but when you think about it, if you were to put this in an 18-wheeler or a car where the windshield is much further away from the driver, or if you're not able to reach to the camera and actually manually save, or if you are in an accident, the voice record feature or the voice save feature is very useful in those situations. So I do still use that, and I do still use the lane departure warning, and it tells you, if you're moving out of your lane. And coincidentally, it actually works pretty accurately. It matches the safety features in my Toyota, which does the same thing. It tells you if you're drifting out of your lane or not. But there's tons of other features that I've honestly just turned off just because they were not of use to me. So that's something to take into account too when you're looking at these cameras. All these features they add drives up the cost, and if you're not going to use them, that can certainly play into the cost factor. Now, if you've watched the video this long, I did want to add a special segment to this video, and that is a few years ago, I actually made another dash cam video. And unfortunately, it didn't get quite as many views as the Garmin one did. And I don't know if that's due to the algorithm or what the scenario behind that was, but I reviewed this camera right here, which at the time, this was $40 on Amazon. And it is an Anker Roav camera. And it actually has I believe it was a Sony, I don't know the exact chipset number, but it was a Sony chip. And I was quite impressed with the fact that Anker is a fairly reputable brand in terms of, battery packs and cases and accessories and things like that. And it's been around for a while, so I figured I would give it a shot. And for my daily driver commuter car, it's quite old, and so I didn't really want the best of the best, but I did want something that could accurately show, a scenario in an accident. And at the time, $40 is what I was willing to spend. And so I took a chance, I bought the camera, and I can tell you I've used this camera for almost 2.5 years now. And this camera is arguably just as reliable as the Garmin. Now, it doesn't have quite the picture quality, even though this camera does have a 1080p capability, or they say HD 1080p. I think overall, I tend to look at the videos in 720, frankly, because it just simply can't handle the processing power of, compiling a 1080p video. But with that being said, this camera, I haven't been able to find it again on Amazon. I think they may have changed the name or discontinued it and created a new version. I frankly wished I had bought another one of these, because this camera has been a rock star. It is held up in the summer heat. It is held up in the winter. I use the suction cup mount because the actual 3M adhesive mount that came with this one wasn't quite as good as the Garmin. And so I wind up using the 3M or the suction cup mount in lieu of the 3M option that came with this camera. And I've come out to my car on a hot summer day, and that has failed, and it's laying in the floorboard. And that's happened more times than I can count now, and the camera still holds up fine. One thing that I have noticed, and this is going to be true of any device that's plugged up 100% of the time, is the battery power on this is 0. If I unplug it from the car, I almost have no time to view the footage on this back screen here unless I leave it plugged up to the car, which isn't convenient because the wire is ran through the headliner like it is in the 4Runner. So I usually end up having to take the card out of the side and actually viewing the footage on my computer. But overall, I did want to give this a special mention for the more budget conscious, that this is a very powerful camera. And if you can find one that has a reputable chip in it and has relatively good reviews, I think you would also be in good service. I will say at nighttime is where you really start noticing this camera struggling a little bit, as opposed to the Garmin that has a significantly better chipset. You can see license plates far more clearer, but with that being said, this would get the job done. You can make out plates, you can see cars, you can see red lights and stop signs, things like that with this camera. They're just not as crisp as they are with the Garmin. One last thing I will mention, and I think this is going to be true of every camera. The camera has to be able to save the footage. And unfortunately, if you do not get a reputable memory card, sometimes the footage can be corrupted. And honestly, I'll go ahead and tell you now, as a hobbyist photographer, you know, it doesn't really matter how good your camera is if you're not able to save what you're capturing. And you always want to make sure that you have reputable memory cards, particularly ones that can handle the speed of the camera. And what I mean by that is certain cameras have various rewrite speeds, and so you want to make sure that the memory card can actually handle what the camera is producing. And so in my Garmin, I've actually got the extreme version of this card. Frankly, I should put the extreme version in this camera, but again, I tend to view these in 720 on this camera, not utilizing the full 1080p just because of the camera's limitations. And so this Ultra has been just fine over these past few years. One thing that I will mention as well is using a memory card such as a SanDisk, which is a highly reputable brand. It prevents your footage from becoming corrupt. And that's the other part of this is with dash cams, the footage is constantly being overwritten over and over again. And so at some point you begin to diminish the memory, and having a reputable card will prolong the life of the card and also limit the risk that the data will become corrupted. And ultimately that would be the worst scenarios in the event of something and you need the footage from this camera only to find out that the footage is corrupted and not being able to be used. So I think as much as we review these cameras, the memory card is just as important. So I wanted to throw that out there. So again, hope that's helpful for you guys. I really do appreciate all the interest in my former video for the Garmin Dashcam 47. I was very surprised that it got as many views and continues to get as many views as it has. And so I was really eager to do this long-term video for you. But that's it for this one, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.